Good evening, everyone. I am Charlie Ocean. My pronouns are they, them, and I am thrilled to introduce one of my friends. We're internet pals. We haven't met in person yet, but fingers crossed we figure that out sometime soon. So please give a warm welcome in the chat to Destiny. Destiny uses she, they pronouns and is the incredible mind behind Closeted History, which is a podcast that explores queer and trans history. Super proud of her. To get the best experience with it, I highly recommend watching it on YouTube so you can see the video and all the visuals because they put a lot of effort into it. So, as an educator, creative, and active member of the LGBTQ plus community, they bring a wealth of knowledge and passion to everything that they do because the list gets longer and longer. So today she will be sharing insights on implementing allyship in our everyday lives. And their presentation is titled Pride in Practice. So Destiny, the floor is yours. I have to let you unmute. Yep, hold on.
Okay, and there we go. All right, well, thank you so much, Charlie, for the warm welcome. I am so privileged to be here. I really appreciate all of the warm welcomes and hellos. So, as they mentioned, my name is Destiny Clark. I am an educator, I'm a podcaster, a fellow creative, and I am part of the LGBTQ plus community. I really, really appreciate you being here and spending your evening with me. So, with that in mind, I'm just going to get right into it and share my little presentation that I got for you. And so, as Charlie mentioned, it is called Pride in Practice, implementing allyship in everyday life. And so I want to tonight give you just some quick and actionable ways that you can integrate allyship into your daily routines, where we can get to an environment that feels more inclusive and supportive for marginalized groups, even within the LGBTQ plus community. And so Charlie just put in the chat, and I'll just reiterate that we will do questions at the end. There are a couple of places within the presentation that I'll just kind of ask for your feedback, or if you want to share in the chat, then that is cool with me. But so yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. So as I mentioned, my name is Destiny Clark. My pronouns are she, they. And I am currently in North Carolina. This is where I was born and raised. And so growing up queer in the South was quite the challenge. And I always wished that I knew more LGBTQ plus history than what was taught to me in North Carolina and really just to the general public. And that's what has kind of fueled my passion now with Closeted History, because when I was working as a consultant back in 2022, actually when Charlie and I met, or maybe 2021 now, but I was working as a consultant and I was helping educators integrate LGBTQ plus inclusiveness into their classrooms. And I found that like they didn't know the history either. And so I felt really inspired to share the history of those who came before us that, you know, lived and loved just like us and that were a part of the LGBTQ plus community, or just like someone that we love and care for. So just to get us started, I kind of want to start with what is allyship? What does it mean to be an ally? And what does it mean to call yourself an ally? So if you want to just put in the chat your initial thoughts, what does it mean to be an ally to you? Or just in general, what is allyship? To me, I think that being an ally really requires action, that we can talk about who we want to be, we can talk about how we want to be perceived, but that at the end of the day, we're really measured by our actions. Mark, you said supporter, absolutely, because it is important to support and to um, someone else said taking action in support. Absolutely, I agree that it is about action. And I think that that is a really important thing to understand and to follow through on, is that it is about action and not just about, um, talking about it. Charlie shared not allowing fear of mistakes to keep us from doing work. Absolutely, because again, we have to do the work. And then Polly, an upstander, not a bystander. I love that. So those are all some really great responses. And so we're gonna just go straight into I have 3 tips for you tonight in practicing allyship. Some of them are on an individual level, and they could also be applied as an organization, since we're a group of people who all have individual things that we're all working on in our anti-racist, anti-bias, and pro LGBTQ plus journeys. And there are also things that we could do like as an organization, since this is PFLAG and one of the greatest LGBTQ plus organizations and one of the oldest. So these things can apply both to the individual level and the organization. And so the first tip tonight is just to share and ask for pronouns. So just like how I introduced myself when we first began talking, I told you that my name's Destiny. I use she, they pronouns. And so it's really, really important to use that as your starting place, because you can't determine what someone's pronouns are just by looking at them. And pronouns don't automatically mean gender identity or anything. That they're just words that feel good to a specific person, and we want to honor that, because asking and using someone's correct pronouns is the most basic way that we can show respect for people's gender identity and how they identify themselves. And like I said, it doesn't necessarily always align with what they're like. Pronouns don't equal gender identity, but they can be helpful language to express that. But they're not like, one doesn't equal the other, if that makes sense. And when we do share our pronouns, that it ensures that no one's going to be misgendered. Even if you're a cisgendered person, it's still important for you to share what your pronouns are, because it just ensures that no one is going to be misgendered. And when we do refer to someone as the wrong pronoun, it can really bring up feelings of disrespect, of alienation, feeling dismissed, and for some people, often dysphoria, or all of the above. And so, say you're in a situation where you unintentionally misgendered someone, or you used the incorrect pronoun for them. So that's okay. Mistakes happen, but it's important to just correct yourself or apologize, rephrase your statement with the correct language, and then just simply move on. It's really important that you don't over apologize, and that you just kind of take that moment of accountability. Up, okay, I'm sorry. What I meant was, and then rephrase and move on. And it really does take practice. And so the more that you practice and the more that you correct yourself, the easier that will become. And so the second tip, and again, if you have any questions, we can save those all the way until the end. But the second tip is using inclusive language. And again, this could be applied on the individual level or as an organization. And inclusive is a very broad strokes kind of term, but we'll talk more about what that looks like and what that sounds like. But the truth is that language sends a message, whether it's intentional or not. It can reveal who we are, what our values are, how we understand the world. And there are multiple places where we can examine our language and think about the way that we're presenting ourselves and being perceived by others. And so, again, like I mentioned, this can be done on the individual level or as an organization. So, some places to think about are like your mission statement, if you have an employee handbook or any of your policies as an organization, social media posts, internal communications, questionnaires, things like that. If you're posting job postings or volunteer opportunities. And again, this is some of these are just for the organization, but then if you're just an individual posting something on social media or some sort of like public facing communication, you're in a meeting in a present or giving a presentation. These are all places that you can think about whether your language is sending the message of your values and if your language is inclusive. And so some simple swaps, because again, I mentioned that we'll talk about kind of what that looks like. So for example, instead of saying, hello, ladies and gentlemen, or good evening, ladies and gentlemen, that a simple swap could be, hello, friends, esteemed guest. We're in the South, so we say y'all, which is very common. It might be a little bit weird for Cali folks. But then instead of using gendered pronouns, his and her, you can use their or use they, them as a neutral thing. And one way that I have kind of learned to practice this is with strangers that we don't know what someone's identity is. We don't know what language they use for themselves. So when I see a stranger and I'm like, oh man, this person just cut me off or they were speeding, I'm using that neutral language that is inclusive because I don't know, they're a stranger. Or another example is like, do you have any brothers or sisters? And instead you could swap that with, do you have any siblings? So I'll take this moment to just check the chat. And if you have any examples that you can think of now, maybe we could share those in the chat as well. So instead of ladies and gentlemen, maybe there's like something that you hear that's pretty gendered that you're feeling like you could make a swap. Please feel free to share those in the chat. Okay, spouse or partner. Yep. Are you seeing anyone versus boyfriend or girlfriend? Students instead of boys and girls. Yep. Yep. Excellent. Well, keep those coming. I'm going to keep going. Okay. That way we can get to the rest of your questions at the end. And so the last tip that I have for you before our Q&A is just to practice intersectionality. And so again, that could be applied on the individual level or as an organization. And so to kind of start us off, let's talk about what intersectionality is and where it came from. It's a framework that's been to describe the intersection and overlap of people's layered identities in the face of inequality. So for example, like I'll just use myself as an example that I am a white femme appearing person. I'm non-binary, but I appear as a white woman. English is my first language. I'm a queer person. I would describe myself as disabled. I have mostly resilient mental health. I was born in the excuse me, I was born in the United States, so I'm a US citizen. So there are multiple facets of my life where I have privilege, but then there are other parts where I do belong to a marginalized community. And so this framework, which was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, just she uses it to describe the lens in which you see the ways that those parts of our identity come together and interlock and intersect. So behind this idea, we are recognizing that there are inequalities that exist in multiple facets of life. People can be they can face oppression or discrimination based on their race, their gender, their sexual orientation, what their immigration status is, what their socioeconomic environment looks like, whether they're disabled or not. And so this image that I have here is called the Wheel of Power and Privilege, which since I think that it's been updated since this version, but this is a really good starting place because you can see in the middle where our society gives power to these identities. And then on the middle ring, you can see that there is some marginalization, but then as you get closer to the edge, that those would be your more vulnerable populations. And so when you're thinking about your language, when you're thinking about the steps that you're taking in your allyship, that we have to use this lens to lead our work. Because as we mentioned, people can experience inequalities from all different facets of their identity, and we look at the whole person. And so we have to use this as our framework, because we know that the issue isn't isolated to like a specific area. It's not just race or gender or class or LGBTQ plus people experiencing oppression, that often there are multiple forms of discrimination happening all at once. And so I just love to quote Audre Lorde that there is no such thing as a single issue struggle because we do not live single issue lives. And that is so true. And going back to using myself as an example, that I grew up in a low socioeconomic environment. And, you know, my mom was a single mom, 3 kids, things were tough. I grew up in the South being a queer person, but it doesn't exclude the privileges that I have as a white person in the United States. It doesn't exclude any of the other privileges that I have, like being a US citizen, having English as my first language, so on and so forth, going back to that intersectionality lens that we're looking at. And you'll have access to this presentation and to the slides afterwards. So I really, really encourage you to revisit intersectionality. And so now that we've kind of had this little chat, you got your 3 big tips. I want you to revisit what that question, what is allyship? And what does it mean to call yourself an ally after having this conversation? Have things kind of changed? Have you maybe thought of something that you didn't think of before? Again, this would be a great time to put that into the chat. And so maybe there's something that you thought of that you didn't think of before, and I'll just let you, oh, we're going backwards. Okay. So as you're thinking of those things, I just want to kind of close with this, that I know as an organization, PFLAG is supporting those in their lives and those around them who are part of the LGBTQ plus community. And I as I shared, am an educator, and working with youth is really, really important. And so, as we are thinking about these things, that while we know that our LGBTQ plus youth are facing a number of challenges given the current circumstances, maybe what their home environment looks like, or maybe there are some people in their lives that are not as accepting. But so I wanted to kind of end us with some joy before we look at that. I did see some chat responses. So Kai said, allyship can be something as simple as sharing your pronouns first. Absolutely. And because if you want to present yourself as an ally, that it does take taking that first step, right? Supporters of all identities within a person. Absolutely. That we can't cherry pick and pick and choose what parts of people that we want to support, that, we support the whole person. And that includes everything. Making space at the table, particularly when you don't share the same identity. Yeah, that we have to learn from people who are different from us and have different perspectives, and use that insight and that learning to just try to be better, right? Model showing respect using the right pronouns and inclusive language. Perfect. Self-correcting when we hear ourselves make mistakes. Absolutely. And I just want to emphasize that, like, you will make mistakes, and that is okay. But it's about what you choose to do when you make that mistake. That, apologize, acknowledge that you did make a mistake, and that, we're all human beings. That's okay. But I'm sorry. And then rephrase, and then just simply move on. The way that we can show people that we're sorry about doing that is just by trying to do better. And that takes lots of practice, acknowledging our mistakes, and then just moving on. And then Harry said the idea of requiring action makes a lot of sense. Otherwise, it would be difficult to call oneself an ally. Absolutely. I think that action is really, really important. And really in anything, if you're passionate about something, that like taking the action steps to make it happen, I think that's all that we can do. Okay, so with that being said, I'm just going to close off on some things that our youth are finding some joy in. So affirming parents, maybe that's one of our folks here tonight that is an affirming parent. And so thank you so much for doing that and being here. Chosen family, educational opportunities, having supportive friends, representation in media. And then, of course, I have to plug this one, learning more about LGBTQ plus history, which, if you are looking for some LGBTQ plus history, as Charlie mentioned, my podcast is one of those places that you can find that. I am really, really passionate about sharing some of those hidden stories that have been kind of tucked away from the mainstream, and letting people know what the whole truth is about people, including some of the parts that might not be as shiny and favorable, that we have to look at history with a critical eye. And that means acknowledging the good, the bad, the ugly, and all in between. So if you are interested in learning more LGBTQ plus history, I definitely recommend checking out my podcast. Again, it's called Closeted History. You can find us on all of the podcast platforms. We're also on YouTube. And so that feels like a good place to put a pin in it, and yeah, ask what questions do you have. I would love to hear your questions in the chat. Thank you so much, Charlie, for plugging the cowboy episode. Honestly,
Always.
the cowboy episode is my greatest production, so I would
Yeah.
definitely recommend. So please, yeah, send your questions in the chat, and if I hope that this is not the last time that we see each other, or at least get to visit with each other a little bit. I have our social media pages, our website, it's all set up. So Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, Threads, all the places, it's all at Closeted History. And if you're interested in keeping up with the show and free downloads and kind of what I'm up to, you can join our monthly newsletter as well. So I will stop sharing and then open the floor for some more questions.
Love it. Well, there's definitely at least one coming through. So before I stop the recording so that we
Mm-hmm.
can have more privacy for our Q&A, just want to say, Destiny, thank you so much. I think you managed to jam in a lot of really great information in a short amount of time. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I will stop the recording now.